At the restaurant, my daughter-in-law threw my plate on the floor. "Witch, you should have never come!" Everyone stared, and my son didn't defend me. On Monday, she received a letter from the lawyer. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I can still hear the sound of my plate shattering against the floor. China breaking into pieces just like my heart. The entire restaurant went silent, all eyes turning to our table. Melissa stood over me, her face twisted with disgust, while David, my only son, just sat there, eyes fixed on his napkin. "Mom, maybe you should go?" he finally mumbled, still not looking at me. To 62 years old, and I'd never felt so small. I had been so excited about this dinner. It was my birthday, and David had actually called to invite me. After months of unanswered calls and brief hurried conversations, I thought things were finally changing. I spent hours getting ready, putting on my best dress, the pearl necklace Richard had given me before he passed away 6 years ago. I arrived at Giovanni's, a fancy Italian restaurant. I couldn't really afford clutching a small photo album I'd put together. Pictures of David growing up. I thought we might look through it together over dessert. Silly me. The tension was palpable from the moment I sat down. Melissa barely acknowledged my presence, typing furiously on her phone. David seemed nervous, constantly checking his watch. Still, I tried. God knows I tried. How are the children, I asked, desperate to hear about my grandchildren? I hadn't seen them in almost 10 months. "They're fine," Melissa snapped, not bothering to look up from her phone. I persisted, smiling through the pain. "I brought a little gift for Sophie's birthday next week. I hope she'll like it." That's when Melissa finally looked at me, her eyes cold as ice. "We already told you Margaret Sophie has too many toys. She doesn't need your cheap trinkets." David shifted uncomfortably. "Melissa, please." "No, David. I'm tired of her trying to buy our children's affection when she was such a terrible mother to you." I felt like I'd been slapped. I don't understand," I whispered. "You never do. Do you?" Melissa continued, her voice getting louder. "Always playing the victim. Poor Margaret, all alone in that big house. Maybe if you hadn't been so controlling, David wouldn't have needed therapy." Therapy. This was the first I'd heard of it. I looked at my son, confused and hurt. "David," he wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's nothing, Mom. It's not nothing," Melissa insisted. "Tell her how she ruined your childhood. Tell her how she never let you be your own person." The waiter arrived with our food, awkwardly placing plates in front of us as Melissa continued her tirade. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. When the waiter left, I tried to reach for David's hand. "Honey, I don't know what." That's when Melissa snapped. She stood up, grabbed my plate of pasta and threw it to the floor. "You witch, you should never have come!" The crash silenced the entire restaurant. I felt the eyes of strangers burning into me as sauce splattered across my dress and shoes. "David," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "David, please." But my son, the little boy I'd raised alone after Richard died of cancer when David was just 12. The boy I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college just sat there silent, ashamed. Not of Melissa, but of me. I grabbed my purse hands, trembling so badly I could barely stand. "I'm sorry to have ruined your evening," I managed to say, dignity the only thing I had left. Then I walked out, head held high, despite the tears streaming down my face. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and sobbed. Through the restaurant window, I could see them continuing their meal, as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. I drove home to the house Richard and I had bought 35 years ago, the house where David took his first steps, where he had his first kiss on the porch, where he told me he was going to marry Melissa. The house that suddenly felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Richard's old armchair, surrounded by photo albums and memories, trying to understand where I'd gone wrong. Had I been controlling? Had I ruined David's childhood? The questions haunted me until dawn. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The tears had dried, leaving behind a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I picked up the phone and called a number I hadn't used in a long time. Thomas, it's Margaret Collins. I need your help. On Monday, Melissa received a letter from my lawyer. Her account had been frozen. What my son and his wife didn't know, what I had kept secret for years out of respect for their independence, was about to change everything. 3 days after the restaurant incident, I sat across from Thomas Reed in his office. The leather chair felt cool against my back as I watched him review the documents I'd brought. "You sure about this?" Margaret Thomas asked, peering at me over his reading glasses. We'd known each other for 35 years since he was a fresh-faced lawyer, and I was a young wife helping my husband build our business. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's going to cause quite a stir. You know I'm counting on it." What David and Melissa didn't know, what I had kept hidden out of some misguided desire to not appear boastful, was that I wasn't just David's aging mother living on a modest pension. That story was a facade I'd maintained for years. The truth was far different. While Richard had been the face of Collins Construction, I had been its backbone. After his death, instead of selling the company as everyone expected, I took over. Quietly behind the scenes, I grew the business into one of the most successful construction firms in the state. I lived simply not out of necessity, but by choice. The big house I kept mostly because of the memories it held, not because I needed to impress anyone. But the most significant secret, the beautiful colonial home where David and Melissa lived with my grandchildren. The home they believed David had purchased with his successful career as an investment banker was actually mine. I had bought it 7 years ago when David mentioned wanting to move to that neighborhood but couldn't quite afford it yet. "Let me help," I'd offered. "No, Mom," he'd said firmly. "We don't need your money." So I'd purchased the house through my company and arranged for them to buy it through a private sale at half its market value. David believed he'd gotten a fantastic deal from a motivated seller. In reality, I still held the deed, and their mortgage payments went into a trust I'd established for my grandchildren's education. It was all perfectly legal, if somewhat deceptive. I had told myself it was what any mother would do, help without wounding pride. Now I wondered if I'd just been enabling the distance between us, allowing them to believe they didn't need me, when in fact, they'd been relying on me all along. "The letter should arrive today," Thomas said, interrupting my thoughts. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" The letter he'd prepared informed Melissa that the credit card she'd been using, a card she believed was linked to a special account David had set up for her, was actually supplemented by me. Every month when she maxed it out on designer clothes and spa treatments, it was my money covering the difference. David didn't know. He assumed his salary covered their lavish lifestyle. It didn't. "I'm prepared," I said, though. My heart ached at what was to come. "It's time for some honesty in this family." I left Thomas' office and drove to the small cafe where I often went to think. As I sipped my tea, my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, David." What the hell is going on?" His voice was tight with anger. "Melissa just got some letter from a lawyer saying her card has been frozen and that I've been supplementing it for the past 5 years. I finished for him. "Yes, that's correct." Silence on the other end. "Then what are you talking about, David? We need to have a conversation about finances, about the truth about your house." "My house." "What about my house?" I took a deep breath. The house is in my name. David. Always has been. Another long silence. I could almost hear him processing this information, rearranging what he thought he knew about his life. That's not possible, he finally said. I have the mortgage. I make the payments every month. Yes, you do. To a trust I established. I own the house, David. I've been helping you financially for years, but after what happened at the restaurant, I've decided it's time for some honesty between us. This is crazy, he sputtered. You're making this up because Melissa upset you. Mom, this is exactly the kind of controlling behavior she was talking about. His words stung, but I stayed calm. I'll be at home all afternoon. Come by when you're ready to talk. Bring Melissa if you want. I'll have all the documentation ready. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from resolution. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be pushed to the margins of my son's life, watching from a distance as Melissa poisoned him against me. I'd tried to buy their love, or at least their tolerance, with silent financial support, and never asking for acknowledgement. No more. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find David standing there alone, his face a storm of confusion and anger. Prove it? He demanded, pushing past me into the house. I led him to the dining room where I'd laid out all the documents, the deed to their house bank statements, showing my monthly supplements to Melissa's spending tax records, proving I still owned Collins Construction. I don't understand, David whispered as he flipped through the papers. Why would you hide this from me? From us? I sat down across from him, suddenly feeling every one of my 62 years. Because you made it clear you didn't want my help, I said softly. But you needed it, and I just wanted to be part of your life, even if you didn't know it. David looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. Does Melissa know? He asked. No. The letter was the first she's heard of it. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. She's furious. She thinks you're trying to punish her for what happened at the Giovanni's restaurant. And what do you think? David looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I think I don't know my own mother at all. The next morning, a car door slammed outside my house with enough force to rattle the windows. I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing tea, though I knew exactly who had arrived. Mom! David's voice bellowed as he burst through the front door without knocking. We need to talk now. I took my time adding honey to my tea, steeling myself for what was coming. When I finally entered the living room, David wasn't alone. Melissa stood beside him. Her face flushed with anger, designer purse clutched like a weapon. Good morning, I said evenly. Would either of you like some tea? Cut the act, Melissa snapped. What kind of sick game are you playing? I settled into Richard's old armchair, regarding them both with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. No game. Melissa, just truth. David paced the room, agitated. After our conversation yesterday, I'd expected him to look more humbled. Instead, he seemed reinvigorated with anger. You can't just freeze Melissa's accounts, he insisted. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was for her when her card was declined at Macy's in front of everyone? I almost laughed. Is that really what concerns you most right now? Embarrassment at a department store. You're trying to control us, Melissa interjected. Just like you've always tried to control David. He told me all about his childhood, how you suffocated him after his father died. I set my teacup down. The gentle clink against the saucer, a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Is that what you believe, David? That I suffocated you? He stopped pacing, his hands curling into fists. You never let me make my own decisions. Every time I wanted to do something, play football, go away for summer camp. Even my choice of college, you had to weigh in. I weighed in because I was your mother, I said quietly. A single mother trying to raise a son and run a business after her husband died. I wasn't perfect, David. Far from it. But everything I did was out of love for you. Love? Melissa scoffed. If you loved him, you wouldn't manipulate him like this. I fixed my gaze on her. Like what exactly? By helping you maintain a lifestyle you can't afford, by giving you a house you couldn't otherwise live in. We don't need your money, David insisted. I make more than enough. No, you don't. I interrupted, surprising even myself with my directness. David, your salary is substantial, but not enough for the way you and Melissa live. The house alone would consume nearly 70% of your take-home pay if you were actually paying market rate for it. I reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to him. These are your financial records for the past 5 years. The withdrawals, the credit card bills, the investments that somehow never seemed to mature. He reluctantly took the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it. This is an invasion of privacy, Melissa sputtered, but I could see the fear behind her indignation. Perhaps I acknowledged. But sometimes, the truth needs to be invasive to be heard. David flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. This can't be right. We don't spend this much on. What is luxury boutique services? Melissa quickly moved to close the folder. It's nothing. Your mother is obviously making things up to come between us. Am I asked softly. David, I've known for years that Melissa has been manipulating you. I stayed silent because I didn't want to lose you completely. Every time I tried to get close, she found a way to push me further away. Made up stories about things I supposedly said or did. That's not true. Melissa's voice rose to a near shriek. Remember when you thought I refused to attend Sophie's christening? I was never invited. Or when you believed I criticized your parenting at Thanksgiving? I wasn't even there. David looked between us, doubt clouding his features. Mom, Melissa wouldn't. She would, and she did. I continued firmly, and I let it happen because I was afraid that if I confronted her, I'd lose any chance of seeing you or my grandchildren. So instead, I helped silently. I bought your house. I supplemented your income. I kept your lifestyle afloat while Melissa systematically cut me out of your lives. Melissa grabbed David's arm. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, of us. She can't stand that you chose me over her. I couldn't hold back a sad laugh. Oh, Melissa, it was never a competition. At least it shouldn't have been. David shook off Melissa's grip, a new weariness in his eyes as he looked at his wife. What is luxury boutique services? He repeated. Melissa's cheeks flushed darker. Just some spa treatments. You know I need to look my best. I stayed silent, letting the moment unfold. David turned to a specific page in the folder, his finger tracing down a column of figures. 18,000 in spa treatments in 1 month. His voice was incredulous. There's a very exclusive retreat in California, I supplied quietly. They're known for their discretion and their plastic surgery. The color drained from Melissa's face. You spied on me. No, I review all financial transactions related to my accounts. The credit card you've been using is linked to me. Remember, I simply read the statements. David turned to another page, his movements becoming more frantic. What about these withdrawals? 10,000 here, 15,000 there? I don't know what those are for, I admitted. Perhaps Melissa can explain. The tension in the room was palpable as David turned to his wife, questions in his eyes. For a moment, Melissa looked trapped, cornered. Then her expression hardened. This is ridiculous, she declared. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at David. Are you coming? David stood frozen, the folder still in his hands, clearly torn. She's using money to manipulate you, David, Melissa insisted, just like she always has. Don't let her come between us. I remained seated, my heart pounding. This was the moment, the precipice. Would David see the truth? Or would he once again choose the carefully constructed reality Melissa had built? He looked at me, and for the first time in years, really saw me. Not the controlling mother Melissa had convinced him I was, but the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Mom, he began, his voice uncertain. It's your choice, David, I said softly. It always has been. Melissa's face contorted with fury. If you stay here with her, don't bother coming home. The ultimatum hung in the air like a thundercloud. David looked at the folder in his hands, then at his wife, then back at me. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Melissa's laugh was bitter. Unbelievable! She's done it again! She stormed out the door, slamming behind her with enough force to shake the house. David and I were left alone, the weight of decades of misunderstandings and manipulations heavy between us. I never wanted it to come to this, I said quietly. Then why did you? He asked, sinking onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. Because sometimes, I replied, love means fighting for the truth, even when it hurts. David didn't stay long after Melissa left. He needed space, he said. Time to process everything. I understood. The foundations of his life had just been shaken. He needed to find his footing again. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Would David come back? Would Melissa find a way to spin this to regain control? I busied myself with work, grateful for the distraction of spreadsheets and client calls. On Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Linda Monroe, my oldest friend. We'd known each other since high school, long before Richard. Before David, before life had carved its complicated paths through our hearts. I brought wine, she announced, holding up a bottle of Merlot. You look like you need it. I couldn't help but smile. Linda had never been one for subtlety. That obvious, huh. She followed me into the kitchen, watching as I fetched glasses. Margaret, you've been sending all your calls to voicemail for 3 days. Your yard hasn't been fussed over in a week. And she peered at me closely. You're wearing the same cardigan you had on when I stopped by on Monday. I glanced down at myself. She was right, so she continued pouring generous glasses for both of us. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to drag it out of you? I sighed, taking a sip of wine before launching into the whole sordid tale, the restaurant. The revelation about the house and finances, the confrontation with David and Melissa. Linda listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Oh, Margaret, she said when I finished. I knew things were strained with David, but I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Neither did I really. I admitted I've been so busy trying to stay in their lives that I didn't see how toxic it had become. Linda took a thoughtful sip of her wine. There's something you should know, she said finally. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach tightened. What is it? She set her glass down, choosing her words carefully. About 3 years ago, I saw Melissa at the Riverside Inn. She was with a man, not David. I stared at her, uncomprehending at first. You mean they were very intimate, Linda confirmed. I didn't say anything because I wasn't absolutely certain, and I didn't want to cause problems if there was an innocent explanation. 3 years ago, I repeated slowly. That's when they were having problems. David told me they were seeing a marriage counselor. Linda grimaced. Unless the counselor was a tall man with a goatee who liked to kiss her in hotel lobbies, I don't think that's what was happening. I felt sick, not just at the revelation of Melissa's infidelity, but at the realization that I'd been financing it, those mysterious withdrawals, the spa retreats. Had I been paying for her to cheat on my son? There's more, Linda said reluctantly. Last year at Patricia Howard's retirement party, Melissa had too much to drink. She was bragging to some women about how she had this perfect setup. A husband who didn't question her spending, and a mother-in-law who unwittingly bankrolled her lifestyle. She knew I whispered, horrified. All this time, she knew I was supplementing their income. Linda nodded. From what she said, she figured it out years ago. She thought it was hilarious, her words not mine, that you were trying to be so secretive about it. I felt as if I'd been punched. All this time, I thought I was helping David, protecting his pride, while ensuring he and his family had the life they wanted. Instead, I'd been played for a fool by Melissa, manipulated just as thoroughly as my son had been. I need to tell David, I said, reaching for my phone. Linda gently laid her hand over mine. Are you sure that's wise? He's already dealing with so much. I hesitated. He deserves to know the truth. All of it. Yes, but timing matters, Margaret. He's just had his world turned upside down. Maybe give him a little time to adjust before adding to it. She was right, of course. But before I could respond, my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. It's him, I told Linda, my heart racing as I answered. David, is everything all right? His voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately worried me. I need to see you. Can I come over? Of course, I said. I'm home now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up without saying goodbye. Linda stood gathering her purse. I should go. This sounds like a conversation you two need to have alone. I walked her to the door, grateful for her friendship, but dreading what was to come. Thank you, Linda, for the wine and for the truth. She squeezed my hand. Call me later. And Margaret, be gentle with him. Finding out your life isn't what you thought it was. That's a hard pill to swallow. David arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his face drawn and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Can I get you anything? Coffee. Something stronger, nothing? He replied, moving past me into the living room. He paced for a moment, then turned to face me, his expression unreadable. I found something he said, his voice oddly flat. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements, not the ones I'd shown him before, but others. Account numbers I didn't recognize, transactions to places I'd never heard of. One name jumped out. Cayman Islands Private Banking Limited. What is this? I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. Melissa has a secret account. David said, his voice cracking slightly. She's been transferring our money into it for years, over $400,000. I sat down heavily, the statements clutched in my hand. Oh, David, I'm so sorry. He laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. You're sorry, I'm the one who should be apologizing. You tried to tell me and I wouldn't listen. I believed her lies about you because it was easier than facing the truth, which is that I married someone who never loved me, he said simply. Someone who saw use as nothing but a means to an end. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that surely it wasn't that bad, but I couldn't bring myself to lie. Not now, when truth was finally breaking through. There's more. He continued, sitting down across from me. I hired a private investigator. My eyes widened. David, that's necessary? He finished firmly. I needed to know how deep this went. And Mom? His voice broke. It's worse than I thought. The investigator had uncovered not just the affair Linda had witnessed, but multiple relationships over the years. Melissa had been systematically stealing from us, building her nest egg while planning her escape. She was going to leave. David said, his voice hollow. The investigator found emails, she and this man she's been seeing. They were planning to take the kids and move to the Cayman Islands once she'd squirreled away enough money. I reached for his hand, and to my surprise, he let me take it. The children, I said softly. How are they? Confused. Melissa told them I'm on a business trip. His eyes filled with tears. I haven't figured out how to tell them that their mother has been lying to all of us. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Finally, David spoke again, his voice stronger. I've been such a fool, Mom, and not just about Melissa. He squeezed my hand. I let her convince me that you were the enemy that you were controlling and manipulative, when all along it was her. We were both deceived, I said gently. He shook his head. No, I should have seen it. The way she isolated me from you, from my friends, the way she always had an explanation for everything. The missing money, the late nights, the constant criticism of you. I wanted so badly to believe we had this perfect life that I ignored all the signs it was falling apart. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, but I knew he needed to work through this himself. Instead, I asked, "What will you do now?" David straightened, a resolve settling over his features that reminded me so much of Richard. It made my heart ache. I've frozen all our accounts. I've contacted a lawyer not just about a divorce, but about pressing charges for the theft. And Mom, he hesitated. I need to ask you a huge favor. Anything I said, and meant it to. Can the kids and I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out. For the first time in years, I felt hope flutter in my chest. Of course you can. This is your home too. It always has been. Later that night, after David left to pack some things for himself and the children, I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the backyard where he used to play. So much had changed. So much pain had been inflicted. But maybe, just maybe from these broken pieces, we could build something new, something honest. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Everything okay? I thought for a moment before replying. No, but I think someday it might be. 2 weeks later, my quiet house had transformed into a home again. The sound of children's laughter filled rooms that had been silent for too long. Sophie, 7, and Ethan, 5, brought a chaotic energy that both exhausted and invigorated me. Grandma, watch this, Ethan called, executing a wobbly somersault in the living room. Very impressive, I applauded, though my heart skipped a beat as he narrowly missed the coffee table. Maybe we should practice outside next time. David appeared in the doorway, looking more rested than he had in days. Ethan, what did we say about acrobatics in the house? My grandson sighed dramatically. That we saved them for the backyard. Exactly. Why don't you and Sophie go see if the sprinkler's still on? It's hot enough. The children didn't need to be told twice, racing outside with whoops of excitement. David collapsed onto the couch beside me. I don't know how you did it, raising me alone all those years. I smiled, patting his hand. One day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time. He nodded, staring out the window, where his children were now running through the sprinkler, their delighted screams carrying through the open windows. The divorce papers are filed, David said quietly. Melissa's lawyer reached out yesterday. What does she want? Everything he said with a mirthless laugh. The house custody of the kids' alimony. She's claiming I turned you against her and that you're using your financial position to punish her. I shook my head, unsurprised. And what did your lawyer say? That she doesn't have a leg to stand on? The financial records clearly show she was stealing from us. Plus, he hesitated, then continued. The private investigator found more evidence of affairs. Multiple affairs, Mom going back years. I squeezed his hand, saying nothing. Some wounds were still too fresh for platitudes. I just keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he continued. All the times I defended her to you convinced she was right and you were trying to control our lives. I was so blind. We see what we want to see sometimes, I replied gently, especially when it comes to people we love. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for believing her lies about you, for shutting you out, for the way she treated you at the restaurant. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do, he insisted. I was wrong, and I've spent too many years letting Melissa come between us. I felt tears sting my eyes. Well, we're here now. That's what matters. Outside, Sophie let out a particularly loud shriek as Ethan aimed the sprinkler directly at her. David smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes. They've missed you, he said. Even though Melissa limited their time with you, they've always talked about Grandma Margaret and her cookies and her stories. My heart swelled. They're remarkable children. They are, he agreed. And they deserve better than what they've had. A mother who was more interested in her social standing than their happiness. A father who was too wrapped up in maintaining appearances to see what was happening right in front of him. You're being too hard on yourself, I said firmly. You're a good father, David. Look at how you've handled all this. Protecting them, keeping their routine as normal as possible despite everything falling apart. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm trying. It's just a lot. One day at a time, I reminded him. The next morning, while David took the children to their summer day camp, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. Time to reclaim my own life. I started with a call to Thomas. I want to go public with my role at Collins Construction, I told him. No more hiding behind Richard's legacy or male executives. It's time people knew who's really been running things all these years. Thomas didn't sound surprised. About time, if you ask me. The board will support you. They know you're the reason the company has thrived. Next, I called Linda. I'm having a dinner party on Saturday, I announced. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. It's been too long since I entertained. Margaret Collins, social butterfly, Linda teased. What brought this on? Life's too short to spend it alone waiting for permission to live, I replied. Will you come? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. By Saturday, my dining room table was set for 8. Linda and her husband, my old friend Edward, who'd recently been widowed, Thomas and his wife David and me. The children were having a supervised playdate with friends, giving David a much-needed evening among adults. It felt strange at first hosting again after so many years of quiet solitude. But as wine was poured and conversation flowed, I felt something inside me unfurling like a flower too long kept in the dark. To new beginnings, Thomas toasted, raising his glass. And old friends, I added, looking around at the faces of people who had known me, the real me, all along. Later, as we moved to the living room for coffee, Edward sat beside me on the sofa. It's good to see you like this, Margaret, he said, his voice warm. Reminds me of the dinner parties you and Richard used to throw. You always had a gift for bringing people together. I smiled, touched by the memory. It's been too long. Life gets in the way sometimes, he agreed. After Patricia died, I couldn't bear the thought of socializing. But eventually, I realized she wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. That's exactly it, I said softly. I've been existing, not living, trying so hard to stay connected to David that I lost touch with everything else that makes life worthwhile. Edward nodded, understanding in his eyes. Well, if you're looking to make up for lost time, there's a symphony performance next weekend. I happen to have an extra ticket. I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Possibility. I'd like that. Across the room, I caught David watching us, a small smile playing at his lips. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod of approval. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, David found me in the kitchen washing the last of the dishes. I can't remember the last time I saw you laugh like that, he said, picking up a towel to dry. It's been a while, I admitted. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy. He paused, then added, Edward seems nice. I felt my cheeks warm. He's just an old friend. David hummed skeptically. An old friend who couldn't take his eyes off you all evening. I swatted him with a dish towel. Stop it. We're both too old for that sort of thing. You're never too old for connection, he said, suddenly serious. That's one thing this whole mess with Melissa has taught me. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't value you. I nodded, understanding completely. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, he replied, bumping my shoulder affectionately, even if I was too stubborn to listen for a while. As I climbed into bed that night, I felt different, lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The constant worry about David, the fear of being completely cut out of his life, the careful dance of trying to help without being seen as interfering. All of it had consumed me for so long. Now, for the first time in years, I was thinking about my own life again, my own happiness. Not just as David's mother or Richard's widow or the secret CEO of Collins Construction, but as Margaret, a woman with her own desires, her own future. The next morning, I woke early and did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the small lake outside town where Richard and I used to picnic when we were first married. I sat on the weathered bench that overlooked the water, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I think I'm finally ready to move forward, I whispered, feeling Richard's presence in the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves. To build something new. As if an answer, my phone chimed with a text from David. Kids want to know if Grandma's making pancakes this morning. I smiled, typing back. On my way home now. Tell them to get the blueberries ready. Home. It was home again, filled with laughter and love and possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine just a few weeks ago, and I was ready for all of it. 6 months can change everything. As autumn gave way to winter, the transformation in our lives continued each day, bringing new challenges and unexpected joys. The divorce proceedings dragged on with Melissa fighting every step of the way. Her initial demands had given way to increasingly desperate tactics as her position weakened. When the evidence of her affairs and financial misconduct became impossible to deny, she changed strategies, suddenly casting herself as a victim of a controlling husband and a manipulative mother-in-law. She's claiming emotional abuse now, David told me one evening after the children were in bed. Says I isolated her and monitored her spending. I shook my head, marveling at her audacity. Does she really think that will work? Her lawyer advised against it, he replied, rubbing his temples. But Melissa's never been good at taking advice. She's convinced she can still win this. Despite the ongoing legal battle, life in our home had settled into a comfortable rhythm. David had taken a leave of absence from his job to focus on the children and himself working part-time from home as a consultant. I had officially stepped into the role of CEO at Collins Construction. No longer hiding behind proxies and figureheads, the announcement had caused quite a stir in the business community. Widow revealed as secret CEO. How Margaret Collins built an empire while staying in the shadows, read one particularly dramatic headline. You're famous, Grandma Sophie had declared proudly, showing me a newspaper article one of her friends had brought to school. My teacher says, "You're an inspiration." The house I had once thought too big, too empty, was now filled with life. Ethan's toys cluttered the living room. Sophie's artwork adorned the refrigerator. David's laptop and papers spread across the dining table each evening. And I found myself at the center of it all, no longer relegated to the edges of my son's life, but an integral part of it. On a crisp December morning, as snow dusted the ground outside, I stood in my kitchen preparing breakfast when David entered, a strange expression on his face. "Everything okay?" I asked, flipping a pancake. He held up an envelope. "It just came by courier. It's from Melissa's lawyer." I set down the spatula, my heart rate quickening. "What does it say? I haven't opened it yet." He took a deep breath, then tore open the envelope and scanned the contents. Slowly, a look of disbelief spread across his face. "She's dropping the custody fight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's agreed to supervised visitation only twice a month." I stared at him, stunned. Why would she give up now after fighting so hard? Because of this, he handed me another paper from the envelope, a grainy photograph of Melissa with a man I didn't recognize boarding a plane. She's been living with him in Los Angeles for the past month. According to the investigator, she missed her last 3 scheduled court appearances because she wasn't even in the state. I sat down heavily processing this information. She's abandoned her own children. David nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. Relief, anger, sadness. The lawyer says she's willing to sign over all parental rights in exchange for a lump sum payment and an agreement that I won't press criminal charges for the financial theft. "Are you going to agree?" He ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. Part of me wants to see her face consequences for what she did, but another part just wants this over with for the kid's sake. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." In the end, David chose peace over retribution. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later, full custody to David, a reasonable payment to Melissa that was far less than she'd initially demanded, and the sale of the house they had shared. "What will you do with the money from the house?" I asked, as we signed the final paperwork at Thomas' office. "Put it in a trust for the kids," David replied without hesitation. "It's their future, not mine." Thomas smiled approvingly. "I can help set that up. And Margaret, now that this is settled, we should discuss your estate planning as well." I nodded, a decision I'd been contemplating for months finally crystallizing. Yes, there are changes I want to make. That evening, while the children played in the backyard, David and I sat on the porch watching them mugs of hot chocolate, warming our hands against the winter chill. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking a comfortable silence. "We should move out, find our own place." I felt a pang of disappointment, though I tried not to show it. "Oh well, of course, if that's what you want. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary." "No, Mom." "You misunderstood," he clarified quickly. "I meant we should all move together. This house, it's full of memories. But maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new for all of us." I looked at him in surprise. "You want us to continue living together?" He nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "Unless you'd rather have your space back. I know we've invaded your quiet life pretty thoroughly." "Invaded?" I laughed, the words so at odds with how I felt. "David, having you and the children here has been the greatest joy of my life. I was just afraid you might want more independence." "We've had enough separation in this family," he said firmly. "Sophie and Ethan adore you. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done these past months without you. We're a team now, Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of happiness. I'd love that. A new home for all of us. We found the perfect place 2 weeks later. A spacious house with a large yard close enough to the children's school and my office with a separate wing that gave me my own space while keeping me connected to the family. David insisted on paying half, using his consulting income. It's not about pride anymore, he explained when I tried to wave away his contribution. It's about partnership. We're building this new life together, Mom. Equal partners. The day we signed the papers for the new house, I finalized another important document with Thomas, my new will. Unlike the division Melissa had expected where my assets would go to her and David with nothing for me, this will reflected our new reality. My estate would be divided equally between David and my grandchildren, with provisions for their education and future. Moving day arrived in early spring. As I stood in the empty living room of the house Richard and I had shared for 40 years, memories washed over me. David taking his first steps across this very floor. Richard's laugh echoing from the kitchen. Years of Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations. Quiet evenings alone after they were both gone from my life. Ready? Mom. David asked from the doorway, Sophie and Ethan peering around him curiously. I took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. Our new home welcomed us with bright open spaces and possibilities. We spent that first weekend unpacking and arranging making the house our own. Edward came by with a housewarming gift, a beautiful wind chime for the back porch, and stayed for dinner. His easy conversation and warm laughter fitting seamlessly into our family circle. That night, after the children were asleep and David had retired to his room, I sat alone on the new back porch, listening to the gentle sound of Edward's wind chime in the spring breeze. The stars above seemed especially bright, as if celebrating with us. My phone buzzed with a text. Linda, how's the new place? I smiled, typing back. It feels like home already. Her response came quickly. Of course it does. Home isn't a place. It's the people you share it with. She was right. Of course. For years, I had clung to the past, to the physical reminders of what my family had been. I had tried to buy my way into David's life, silently supporting him financially, while accepting emotional scraps in return. But real connection couldn't be purchased. Real family couldn't be maintained through secret bank transfers and silent sacrifices. It required honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to speak difficult truths. The path to where we were now had been painful. There had been moments of heartbreak so acute I thought I might not recover. But through it all, something stronger had emerged. A relationship with my son based on mutual respect and genuine understanding, not obligation or manipulation. And beyond that, I had reclaimed myself, no longer just someone's mother or widow, but a woman with her own identity, her own strength, her own future, stretching out before her. The house Melissa had coveted so desperately was sold. The control she had wielded over our family was broken. The secrets that had kept us isolated from each other were exposed to light and air, allowing healing to finally begin. I looked up at the stars once more, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over me. The fortune I had hidden for so long was now being used openly to build something far more valuable than any material possession, a family bound by love and truth, not secrets and obligation. In the end, what Melissa had failed to understand was that the true wealth was never in the house or the bank accounts. It was in the connections we built, the trust we earned, the love we shared. And that was something no one could ever take away from us again. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.